ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I think as the title would suggest, I'm an Adman. I think maybe just to elaborate a little bit more on what I do, I work with highly, highly talented people, and I help them to unleash their creativity to solve complex business problems. Now, what's quite interesting is that advertising hasn't always been my first passion. In fact, it's not my first passion, it's my second passion. It's second after music. But, when I was a kid, somehow I didn't have the patience to learn an instrument. And, the fact that I could hold a tune seemed good enough at the time. So I never pursued that part of my passion. But the one passion of mine that did grab a hold of me and wouldn't let me go and hasn't let me go till today is my love for advertising and the communication sphere as a whole. And I think to really, really understand where this passion comes from, you'd have to go back to this man. This is my dad. And you'd have to go back to this brand. This is Benson & Hedges, which doesn't exist anymore, at least not in its current form. Now, what was quite interesting about this brand and my dad is that my dad worked for United Tobacco Company. Now, United Tobacco Company gave my dad and his team the very, very difficult task of growing the market share of this brand within the old Ciskei and the old Transkei, which was not an easy task, not by anyone's measure, if you consider that it was a premium brand up against its more popular and its cheaper counterparts like Stuyvesant, Rothmans, Lexington, and the likes. But what was quite interesting is that somehow they managed to do it. And as a young man, I would always go with him to his promotions, and I'd always be very fascinated just absorbing the creative ways that they would use to actually get people to try out the brand and to actually, take on the brand. And I remember, for instance, seeing things like blind tastings before I ever knew what a blind tasting was. I remember, how he would try and convince somebody that there was no difference between the product that they were smoking and the product that he was offering, except that their product was cheap and nasty, and what he was offering was, was premium. And nobody wants to smoke something that's cheap and nasty, and therefore he was able to convert a lot of people. So as I stand before you today, I'm quite unproud to tell you that my father managed to get a lot of people smoking back in the day without ever having touched a stick himself. And I think that's the sign of a true marketer in terms of my measure. And he would always tell me stories, for instance, about some of his favorite marketers. And what I found interesting is that, he told me this story about this old man who worked at an optometrist in a place called Southernwood in East London. And what this old man would do is that literally they would never place the price on any of their frames in this optometrist. And what they would do is that the boss would give him a base price, and then he would leave everything up to him. And what he would do is that when you came into the optometrist, he would look at, first of all, the car that you came in. He would look at your attire, the accessories, the watch, anything and everything. And he would formulate a price in his head. And when he saw you taking an interest in any of the frames that they had, he'd walk up to you very, very slowly, and he would simply whisper, "That will be 600, sir." Now, what's interesting is that everything that followed would determine how he then responded. So if you, upon hearing this price, which was a very, very expensive price for specs back in the day, I must tell you, if you sort of thought, actually, that's quite reasonable, that makes sense, it's a good pair of glasses. What he would then do is that he would say, "That's just for the frame, sir." So you literally could end up having paid double for that pair of spectacles. Now, if inversely, if you reacted the opposite way, and you thought, you're being ripped off, what a crazy price, it's just a pair of specs at the end of the day, he would be very, very quick to remind you, "Sir, that includes the frame and the lens, sir." And I think, an amazing way that he was just able to demonstrate value, and you walked away thinking that you really got a fantastic deal. So as you can see, I really, really grew up with creativity in my home and also in my general community. Now, fast forward to many years later, and I find myself in this amazing career that I love so dearly. Now, the interesting thing about when I walked into advertising is that it was the first time that, I mean, for me, it was like creativity on steroids. It was like the first time where creativity was at the very heart, the nucleus of what we do. And I mean, if you really, really think about it, you know, that's what ad people do. There is very, very rarely anything new that we're selling you in terms of innovation. You know, toothpaste is toothpaste is toothpaste. Milk is milk is milk. Most of these brands exist. But what we have got to try and do is that we have got to try and convince you to buy one product over another. So how the heck do we do that? And for me, the answer has really just been the fact that we get a brand to bond with you. And how we get a brand to bond with you is by using creativity. And I love what Edward de Bono says when he says, you know, creativity involves breaking out of established patterns in order to look at things in a different way. What's interesting about that quote is that he doesn't say to look at new things in a different way. All these things are existing. And what it is that we've got to try and do from an advertising point of view is that we've just got to try and get you to perhaps see them differently. And that is also not easy. And I think that what is quite interesting for me when I just think from an advertising point of view is that I've got this firm belief that people are attracted to advertising because everybody is inherently creative. And what happens is that a child's mind is the most inquisitive thing that you can find. You know, a child wants to know why. It has no boundaries. You know, it's excited. It wants to draw the world. It wants to do all kinds of things. But unfortunately, what happens when we are young people is that, you know, the logic steps in, and society sort of gets us back into the box. It tells us what to think. It tells us how to feel. And what then happens is that the regimented thinking steps in. And that's what takes over for the rest of the journey, which is actually quite sad, especially when you think about the fact that, you know, it goes right down to our schooling system. It's crazy to think that out of all the subjects that kids are learning at school, you know, only one of them, which is art, is actually about embracing actual creativity. And so we've got all these young people, and I must tell you, being somebody who leads the Loerie's board, one of our biggest mandates is to transform the industry. And everybody says, you know, this is what we need to do. But the one question that nobody is asking is, where is the talent going to come from? Because the truth of the matter is that if you go to any young black kid today who has just finished matric, the first thing that they are doing is that they are going to study what I call the success-safe careers, as dictated to them by their parents, for instance, in many cases. You know, so they go into things like medicine, they go into things like, you know, education, they go into things like law, you name it, but very, very few are actually entering this field. And it's a huge, huge, huge problem because the effects of it are compounding. So I do think that we've got, you know, quite a long way to go before we really, really, all as a nation, walk this creative journey. And I must tell you, the creative journey is not an easy one. There's a lot of challenges that come with it. And challenges like the fact that not all creative ideas are good enough. Now, I must tell you, this is very, very difficult when you work with people because ideas are precious things. You go to sleep with an idea. You wake up with it. You go to, you know, you go out clubbing with it. You are with it in the shower, and you can't wait to share it. And a lot of time when the people that I've got to work with, the young people that I've got to work with, burning with this passion, and somehow you've got to tell this person that, look, it's just not good enough. And I always say to people, out of all the ideas you're going to have, if you're lucky, probably 5% is the real gold. But think of it like mining, you know. You put a lot more back into the ground than what you take out. And I always just try and put a positive spin with the people that I work with, and I always tell them that you're just getting started, and there's more where that came from. And that's what I want to tell everybody here today. I do think that, you know, keep digging. The other one is, you know, be prepared to be wrong. This is another thing that, you know, the creative journey kind of teaches you. You know, you have to be prepared to be wrong. Believe it or not, you are not always right. I think some people find it harder to accept this one than anything else. But what I also find is that when you open your creative idea up for input, you actually build onto it as opposed to taking away from it. So often when I sit with young people, you know, and I may have an opinion on their idea, and maybe somebody really, really believes in it, I allow myself that space to be wrong. And a lot of times, what comes out of it is better for the idea and for all of us. So I really, really do think that we need to leave ego behind. It just doesn't work with creativity. The other one is you have to win your creative battles within yourself before you can win them with someone else. One of my favorite authors talked to me, or rather, I managed to meet him. I was very, very lucky. And there was a very, very interesting story that he told about Hitler. Does anybody know that Hitler actually wanted to be a painter? In high school, Hitler actually used to paint. Now, what's interesting about this story is that today we know Hitler for trying to take over the world. And what you deduce from the story is that it was easier for Hitler to try and take over the world than it was for him to overcome his fear of being creative. And so I must tell you that self-doubt is a huge issue when it comes to creativity. And it's one of those things that we all have to overcome. And then the other one is make your ideas happen. We always say that, any idea is 50%. The other 50% is actually making it happen, and be aware that you will encounter resistance. People will tell you it's never been done before, it won't work. Or they'll tell you it's been done before, so it's copying. They'll tell you all kinds of things, and somehow you've got to overcome all of that, and you've got to make your ideas happen. And then this one is especially close to me, is that apply creativity to everything that you do. I don't care if you are a teacher, I don't care if you work in the community, a musician, a poet, a mathematician, I don't care what it is. I think that if you really, really want to set yourself apart and you really, really want to create work that really makes a difference, you have to apply creativity to everything that you do. If my dad could find it in selling cigarettes, or if the optometrist could use it for selling spectacles, you sure can use it in whatever it is that you do, and I think that you should. So having said that, I think for me, the thing that we're always striving to do in terms of the creative people that we are, is that we try and work with teams to try and find creative ways to do things. But I think for me, where you really, really see the power of creativity, and where I really get excited, is when my work, or when our work, can do more than just sell a product, when it can serve a higher purpose, like when it can change behavior. And that's when I really, really get excited about what we can do and how powerful this creativity weapon truly is. So a couple of years ago, I came across this quote by a great philosopher named Marilyn Monroe. And she said, "Creativity has got to start with humanity. And when you're a human being, you feel, you suffer." And that really, really touched me. And it really led me onto this question to say that, we are idea engineers. And if we are working with these ideas all the time, can we do things that'll do more than just push a product off a shelf? And, the universe conspires. And around this time, we had an amazing opportunity to work with a brand called Brothers for Life. And what's interesting about this brand is that it's an NGO. It's actually funded by the USAID. And very, very often, there isn't a lot of budget to do things. So everything that we do has got to be so efficient. It's got to work so much harder. Every single subject that we are dealing with, whether it's gender-based violence, whether it's multiple and concurrent partners, condom use, you name it. Whatever it is that we've got to do differently, and we've got to make sure that it works that much harder. And today I'd like to show you a very quick piece that I really, really love that we did for this brand a couple of years ago, and hopefully you'll be able to see how powerful creativity can be. So here we go.
Mfana, yasazi steering.
Ngiyasazi vele.
Lawuthi steering mfana. Mfana, yabona ngitshele ke, lawuthi lema kafika, mfana umnyango akawuvula ukhahlela baba.
Yo.
Khahlela ulahlelele mfana. Unamandla lo muntu lona baba.
Serious?
Ngiyakutshela mfana unamandla. Yabona makakhahlela umnyango, uyavithika nje.
Unamanga ntwana. Hayi.
Wena uthatha ama chance mfana. And then ngitshele ke mamela. Yabo makangene akakhuluma isimu. Wena iphoshishi nakasho next. Uvela kubheki nje. Yabona akubheka. Akubambe mfana kushaya baba. Fake take 5 baba. Athi uppercut. Akathathi flying kick mfana.
Ayi wena ngibelieve wena.
Wena weak mfana ngiyakutshela.
No weak.
Uwa weak. How? phela lo muntu uphatha umeso ongaka mfana ujangele omkhulu mfana
Yo,
noma ungabiza amaphoyisa ayi-10 trapa wonke umuntu
amaphoyisa.
mfana lo muntu lana
Amaphoyisa.
shange close line baba
Serious?
serious futhi bebambophile ngesinye isikhathi mfana azange ahlale futhi ejele waphuma buya sekakwatile ke manje
Yo.
ya mfana yabona nangathi uyamphakamela mfana umuntu lo angeke uphakame namanga zokushaya mfana steering ke leso
Isiphi leso?
themalamba baba
Yo.
umama akana chance mfana
Babukeleni abantwana bakho. Asipheliseni ukuhlukumeza abantu besifazane. Brothers for life.
So really, just such a powerful piece of work. And for me, what's quite interesting is that it's based on such a strong insight. The insight being that in very poor communities, what would happen is only one child gets to go and see a movie. And then it becomes the duty of that child to come back and tell everybody about what they saw. And a lot of these movies were action movies. And we juxtapose that with the violence that happens in many people's homes, which is why, you get taken on this journey where you think that he's talking about this movie or this crazy action scene, but it is actually the reality that he lives with in his home. Another piece that I just wanted to share with you today was also done for an NGO. This is our own personal NGO. It's called One School at a Time, where we work with schools to try and, just improve the situation that is out there. And the biggest problem, once again, when it comes to this project is that, it's funding, once again. It's always having to try and find creative ways that we can get people's attention and hopefully get the conversation going so that we can get some funding and actually alert people to the realities of our education system out there. So this is the last piece that I would like to show you today. And we did it for One School at a Time.
Johannesburg, the city of gold. Also, the city of countless beggars. Due to a poor educational system, 80% of South Africa's schools are rated dysfunctional. Of the total number of learners in grade 1, only half will make it to grade 12. And because the system is failing our children, chances are more of them will end up begging. One School at a Time, a registered non-profit organization, plans to change this, starting with Forte High in Soweto. But how do we show that education is the only long-term solution when people are ignoring the problem? We built a device capable of interrupting any radio frequency within a 10-meter range. Then we asked 3 beggars for their help, Agnes, Peter, and Jimmy, and took them to a recording studio. Next, we fitted them with a button camera to capture people's reactions, and then fitted our device to broadcast their voices into the very cars of the people ignoring them.
And he kept sending me it again. Darren, seriously, dude, you must just call my wife.
Hello, I'm Agnes, the woman next to you, wearing the old grey jersey. I stand here every morning. Most of the time, we pretend I'm not here. And it's okay, I understand. If I had gone to school like you, then I would have a job and be driving past people like me. But I didn't. So please, don't give me anything. Rather give at One School at a Time.org.za so that children don't end up on the street. It's not easy.
Sawubona. Yimi lo ome ngenduku eduze kwakho. Ngigqoke ibhantshi elibrown. Igama lami nginguPeter. Angikwazi ukufunda noma ukubhala. Mhlawumbe kuwe bengikwazi ngabe angimi la.
My naam is Jimmy. En my ouers het nie geld gehad nie om my in skool te hou nie. Moenie vir my geld gee nie. Gee eerder vir die kinders. Sodat hulle kan skool klaarmaak en nie op die straat land soos ek nie.
We targeted 20 intersections during peak traffic, reaching over 5,000 drivers and their passengers. But the impact went far beyond our roads, generating over 1.2 million rand worth of PR.
So to me, simply fix education, fix the greater challenges of this country.
Now, lots of people would say, listen, education is dysfunctional, but I can't do anything about it.
With a simple, never-before-seen idea, we use the voices of the most ignored members of our society to make a difference, one school at a time.
Cool. So I really, really do believe that if we can use our creativity to do more than just that which pays us, we'll reap the greatest rewards. I truly believe that creativity is the solution. And I just want to say thank you to TED for inviting me to speak to you today. And to all of you, I want to say, may you please, please, please meet that young creative self of yours and embrace him or her. They've been waiting for you since you left them when you were 5. Thank you.